And when I talk about these interviews and surveys, there are, of course, interviews and surveys done on the UAS. So I worked on this paper with a really wonderful co-author team, including PhD student Nathan Hodson, qualitative research expert Lila Rabinovich, who is in the room today, and then the remaining team of co-authors at USC, we lovingly refer to them as Dan McFadden and his Germans. And the idea for this paper actually came from them, and they reached out to us to ask us to do this work with them. So as a little bit of background, Medicare Part D in the United States provides prescription drug insurance for disabled individuals and those aged 65 and older, and their drugs are covered through a standalone Medicare Part D plan or a Medicare Advantage plan, which is a combination of plans. And we're going to focus for this paper on those people who had a standalone Medicare Part D plan in 2023. There were 22 million of them in that year. So beneficiaries of Medicare can switch plans each year to ensure that they stay in the best plan for them. So there is an annual enrollment period in October to December. Then they can choose a new plan for the next year. They can compare over 20 plans. The number of plans varies from state to state. 20 is the minimum, so there's a lot of plans to look at. And then those plans vary along a wide range of features, including premiums, deductibles, drug costs, and a bunch of other stuff. So it's a complex comparison. And then they can choose to switch to a different plan or to stay with their old plan. But there is a concern that some people don't bother to compare at all because those comparisons are very hard. And then they end up staying with their old plan, not because they're choosing to stay with their old plan, but because they don't do anything, they don't make any comparisons, and the old plan is the default that they stay in. That is a concern because insurance companies change plans from year to year, and people who don't switch at all end up in financially worse plans as the time go on. So economists have raised concerns that people who don't switch may not compare plans at all. They don't have direct evidence. They have indirect evidence from archival Medicare Part D data. So Dan McFadden and the Germans, they published a paper in American Economic Review that raises this concern. And then I also have anecdotal data from an economist, from Dana Goldman. Some of you may know him. He's a health economist at USC. And he told me, not surprisingly, my mother delegated her Medicare Part D decisions to me, her PhD economist son. I paid close attention the first year, but eventually the decisions became so complicated that I stopped comparing plans. So even someone with a PhD in economics can struggle with these Medicare Part D plan comparisons. And so we're concerned that people are not comparing. So we did a mixed method study on the Understanding America study, starting with qualitative interviews done by Lila, in which we identified barriers and drivers to comparing plans and switching, and then also follow-up surveys to assess the prevalence of those of not comparing, not switching, and of those barriers. So Lila did 20 interviews with UAS participants who had indicated on a previous survey that they had a standalone Medicare Part D plan. You might ask, is 20 enough? Well, it's not enough to assess how common it is that people don't compare or don't switch, but it is enough to find out what issues people may experience and then to design a follow-up survey on which we ask more about that. If you don't do the interviews first, you don't know what to ask on the survey. So in the interviews, we identified 3 types of participants. Switchers who said, I actually looked at the Medicare Plan Finder website every year to see if there's a better plans for the needs that I have. I actually do it every year, and this year I decided to switch. And the Medicare Plan Finder website, by the way, is a website where you can type in your information, and then it will generate all the plans that are available to you, and you can sort them by their total costs. We also found non-switchers who did compare. So for example, someone said, we compare plans each year, and this one that we've been on has been the best for the medications that I'm on. But then we also found people who did not switch and did not compare. So someone said, it just never occurred to me. And of course, this is the group that potentially ends up at financially worse plans as the years go by. We also identified potential barriers and drivers. So, for example, not knowing how to switch. So someone said, I don't even know how to switch or whether they have an open season for Part D. Or not knowing how to compare. So someone said, to me, all these plans just look like they say all the same things. They're just different companies. And then we also found that plan changes spurred comparisons. So someone said, I got a letter saying that the plan you have now is going to be called something different next year. The price was going to go up. The coverage was changing. It was going to be a totally different plan. And this supposedly is quite common. And so companies can change your plan and then default you into a new plan, even if they discontinue your plan. And for some interviewees, that led them to make comparisons. So then we did follow-up surveys. With 439 UAS participants who had a standalone Medicare Part D plan. The full survey and the data are available from the UAS, and we welcome you to take a look. For the full set of analysis, please see our Health Affairs Scholars paper that came out in 2024. I'm just going to show you some descriptive statistics. So about half remained inactive during the open enrollment period. So 52% of our Medicare Part D beneficiaries that we surveyed did not compare or switch plans during the 2023 enrollment period. 17% switched and 32% compared but did not switch. So the 52% are the ones that we're concerned about. And then those inactive beneficiaries who did not compare and did not switch, they are most likely, compared to the other two groups, to report that all plans look the same, so they find plans hard to compare. They're most likely to say that they don't know how to switch, and also most likely to say that their plan was unchanged. Now, of course, these are self-reports, so it might be that their plan really was not changed, or they did not notice that their plan was changed. So, in conclusion, 52%, and those results that I showed hold in logistic regressions after controlling for demographics and other characteristics. So in conclusion, 52% of Medicare Part D beneficiaries did not compare plans, probably because comparisons are too hard. Comparisons were more common among those who reported plan changes, but we're not sure that inactive participants had no plan changes at all. It could be that they didn't notice. And these findings are concerning because inactive participants may end up in more expensive plans over time. So how can we help Medicare Part D beneficiaries? Well, there is a Medicare Plan Finder website, which I mentioned earlier, but only 29% of our survey participants said that they used it. And some of our interviewees complained about how hard that website is to use for them. Some loved it, but a lot of them did not. Advisors are available, but only 33% of our survey participants used them. And in behavioral science and behavioral economics, there are suggestions that there are ways to address choice avoidance. You can, for example, reduce the number of options. That makes comparisons a lot easier to make. And it makes it more likely that people engage with the comparisons. You could also set better defaults so that people who just won't engage no matter what you do end up with better plans over time without having to do anything. And you could require choices less often. Like, do we really need an annual enrollment period? Could it be less often? Something to discuss. And there are a lot of people who have suggested those options as well. Thank you very much for your attention.